Hey everybody, it's Adam Tracy, and I wanted to talk about the El Salvadorian crypto license. And outside of, when El Salvador became or attempted to become sort of this Bitcoin haven, right? It didn't really have a license, right? And only in somewhat recent times has it fully adopted regulations that would effectively give you the roadmap to becoming licensed there. And what's unique about El Salvador is that the license is out. First of all, it's extremely quick, right? And the formation of a company, a local company, is not required to apply for the license. So like what happens is you submit the application, which is a fairly scaled down version of what you see really anywhere else. And there's two types of licenses. There's a Bitcoin service provider and there's a digital asset service provider. The Bitcoin service provider is basically for local businesses that deal in Bitcoin because El Salvador recognizes Bitcoin as legal tender. And a digital asset service provider is sort of the catch-all for anybody else who wants to operate anywhere in the world. So that's really what you're probably going to go get. And the application is effectively submitted prior to incorporation. And by law, the National Bank has 20 days to respond, right? And in almost all cases that I've been involved with, they just issue the license, right? And then you can incorporate the actual company and the license becomes active. Now, incorporation can take like 4 weeks, right? So you figure 4 weeks plus like 20 business days, right? And you're looking at, a month and a half to 2 months, roughly. What's unique about it, right? While there is like scaled down documentation, there's not like a full business plan requirement and all this nonsense that you see everywhere else, but they're more inclined to worry about the personnel, right? And the bona fides of those personnel. So you have to have a compliance officer who has to be different than the CEO, and you have to have a chief security officer, like a computer security officer, and that person has to be separate from the chief compliance officer. And the CVs of those persons, right, will be vetted, right, to a degree that you would find in, the EU or someplace else, right? So you need real people, right, to actually fill those roles, okay? And the chief compliance officer, which is really more like a AML reporting officer, it doesn't have to be germane to El Salvadorian law, like, so you can get somebody from outside. It's really germane to where you intend to operate, right? So that's probably the most difficult part because you have to find these people and they have to have the right qualifications to do it. And, what is particularly useful about it outside of the speed is that, and the cost, which you have a $4,500 application fee, roughly $3,500 each year to maintain the license, and then the cost of incorporation. So, and then your minimum capital requirement is like 2,000 US, which is like insanely low, right? So, the impediments are very nominal compared to really anywhere else, but for having like basically 3 people, and as well as 2 shareholders, right? So if you have a partner, you can do it, and you need a local representative, which will cost something, but the local representative doesn't have to be a director. It just has to be like a nominal, almost like a registered agent type, right? So in most cases, when you incorporate the company, the individual who stands as like the corporate service provider can also be that local representative for some fee, which isn't very onerous or nothing like you'll find anywhere else, especially like in the Caribbean. So you have that, and what wasn't the case like 5 years ago is now the case. El Salvador has become very stable, right? It used to be like the crime capital of the world. Well, it's not anymore. And the banks, because Bitcoin is legal tender, are freely accepting of crypto, right? And so to the extent that you need it, you'll find an array of crypto-friendly banks many of which will allow for remote openings if you have the license or are in the process of getting the license, so you don't have to go there. And it's great should you need that fiat off ramp or just need that for like an operating sense to, pay vendors or whatever the case may be. So the infrastructure is there, which is great, right? Because of just the nature of their adoption of Bitcoin. And the license is great because there's really not much to it. Now, like, you can look at it from the optics sense, as like I always want to go to and say, all right, well, I'm licensed in El Salvador versus being licensed in like Malta. What are people going to be more confident of? I think it depends on who your audience is, right? And like, when El Salvador sort of self-adopted itself as this like sort of Bitcoin paradise, well, you saw a lot of people like go down there, right? You saw a lot of people move there thinking it was going to be a lot. And it wasn't at first, but now it's sort of catching up. And conceptually, I think a lot of people in the crypto community view it, and I've, witnessed this firsthand, view El Salvador as being a great place because of the adoption, right? And like, I always go back to the word piratey. Well, it has that flavor, but it is actually a fairly well-regulated country after years and years of tumult. So yes, great place to get it, right? Like, you can be in business in less than 2 months and you have like very minimal impediments in terms of banking. The license is super broad. You can kind of do whatever you want, right? Within the context of crypto. And the costs are like nothing. So, do you start there, get some brand equity, move like I usually recommend people do? Sure, you can. You can stay there forever. Depends, right? And you see how things go. But it's definitely something to investigate, which really, despite all like the noise and like the applause around it, the country adopting Bitcoin many years back. Well, now there's finally some kind of infrastructure where you can take advantage of that adoption, right? That adoption that is like led by the highest tiers of government. And, I don't know how the volcano with the Bitcoin thing worked. I forget that. That doesn't matter. But the law is the law there, and the license is legit. And it's a pretty easy license to not only obtain, but it's also an easy license to maintain, which is probably in most cases harder than getting the license in the first place. So if you have questions regarding the El Salvadorian digital asset service provider license, hit me up. You know my email, Adam@adamtracy, no e.io. Talk to you next time. Cheers.